Welcome to DCF Investigations. The air in Los Angeles on the night of March 8, 1997, was thick with a tension that was almost palpable. A heavy, suffocating atmosphere that seemed to press down on the city's sprawling boulevards. It was a city of dualities, where the glitz of Hollywood coexisted uneasily with the brutal realities of gang warfare, and where the lines between law enforcement and the criminal underworld were becoming increasingly blurred. Just 6 months earlier, the music world had been shattered by the assassination of Tupac Shakur in Las Vegas. A murder that sent shockwaves through the culture and signaled that the East Coast-West Coast hip-hop feud had escalated from lyrical jabs to fatal violence. Now, the eyes of the world were turned toward Christopher Wallace, known to the world as the Notorious B.I.G, or simply Biggie Smalls. He was the king of New York, a storytelling genius whose flow was as smooth as it was heavy, standing at the epicenter of a conflict that had grown far beyond his control. As he traveled to California, ostensibly to promote his upcoming album and signal a truce, he was walking into a landscape rigged with invisible tripwires. By the time the sun would rise on March 9th, the world would lose another icon, and a mystery would be born that would haunt the corridors of the Los Angeles Police Department and the hearts of music fans for decades to come. To truly understand the gravity of this night, we must first look at the man at the center of the crosshairs. Christopher Wallace was more than just a rapper. He was a larger-than-life figure who had risen from the crack-ravaged streets of Bed-Stuy, Brooklyn, to become the face of Bad Boy Records. His debut album, Ready to Die, had revitalized East Coast hip-hop at a time when the West Coast, led by Death Row Records, dominated the charts. But success brought with it a dangerous rivalry. The friendship he once shared with Tupac Shakur had curdled into a bitter, venomous hatred, fueled by misunderstandings, media sensationalism, and the machinations of figures like Suge Knight and Sean Puffy Combs. By 1997, the feud was radioactive. Tupac was dead, gunned down in a white BMW, and rumors swirled that Biggie had somehow been involved, a claim he vehemently denied. Yet, despite the danger, Biggie insisted on coming to Los Angeles. He wanted to prove that he was not afraid, that he was an artist for the world, not just a borough in New York. He wanted to celebrate the completion of his second album, a record chillingly titled Life After Death. The timeline of the tragedy begins days before the shooting, as Biggie and the Bad Boy entourage arrived in California. The vibe was mixed. There were moments of triumph, such as press interviews and radio appearances where Biggie sounded optimistic, speaking of unity and moving forward. However, the undercurrent of danger was undeniable. Security was tight, managed by the Fruit of Islam and personal bodyguards. But the Bad Boy team was operating in hostile territory. Death Row Records, though weakened by Suge Knight's recent incarceration for probation violation, still held immense power on the streets of Los Angeles. The mob Piru Bloods, associated with Suge, were looking for retribution for Tupac's death. Furthermore, the Southside Crips, who had been implicated in the Vegas shooting, were also active players in this deadly game of chess. On the evening of March 8th, Christopher Wallace attended the Soul Train Music Awards at the Shrine Auditorium. The atmosphere inside the venue was hostile. When Biggie's name was announced as a nominee, the crowd erupted in boos, a visceral reminder that he was not welcome. Following the awards, The entourage decided to attend an exclusive after-party hosted by Vibe magazine at the Peterson Automotive Museum on Wilshire Boulevard. This location is crucial to the narrative. The museum, situated in the Miracle Mile district, was a prestigious venue, filled with high-profile celebrities, industry executives, and the elite of Black Hollywood. Inside the party, the mood shifted. It was a celebration. Biggie was seen laughing, drinking, and enjoying the company of friends. Witnesses recall him looking relaxed, perhaps feeling that the worst of the tension had passed. The DJ played hit after hit, and for a few hours, the feud seemed to dissolve into the rhythm of the music. However, the party became overcrowded. The sheer number of people packed into the venue raised safety concerns, and eventually, the Los Angeles Fire Department ordered the event to be shut down early. It was roughly 12:30 in the morning on March 9th when the lights came up, and the guests began to stream out into the cool night air. This forced exit created a bottleneck at the museum's parking garage and the street outside. It was a chaotic scene, with hundreds of people mingling, luxury cars vying for space, and paparazzi flashes popping in the darkness. Biggie and his crew exited the museum and prepared to leave in a 3-car convoy. The specific arrangement of this convoy is a critical detail that investigators would later agonize over. The lead car was a Chevrolet Blazer carrying Bad Boy's head of security, Paul Offord. The second car was a dark green GMC Suburban. This was the vehicle carrying the primary target. Christopher Wallace sat in the front passenger seat. Driving the Suburban was Gregory G. Money Young. In the back seats were Damion D-Rock Butler and Lil Cease. A member of the junior MAFIA. Bringing up the rear was a Chevrolet Blazer, carrying Sean Puffy Combs and his security detail. The convoy pulled out of the parking structure and turned right onto Fairfax Avenue, traveling north toward Wilshire Boulevard. The plan was to head to a secondary gathering at a private residence in the Hollywood Hills. The mood in the Suburban was light. They played a cassette of the forthcoming album, the heavy bass rattling the windows of the SUV. As they approached the intersection of Wilshire and Fairfax, the traffic light turned yellow, then red. The lead car made it through, but the Suburban carrying Biggie stopped at the light. Puffy's vehicle stopped behind them. It was 12:45 a.m. At this precise moment, the trap was sprung. A dark-colored Chevrolet Impala SS pulled up alongside the green Suburban. The Impala is a detail that has been scrutinized for decades. It was a common car in Los Angeles, but the way it maneuvered was precise, predatory. The driver of the Impala, a black male dressed in a blue suit and bow tie, according to some accounts, though descriptions vary, rolled down his window. He looked directly at Christopher Wallace. There were no words exchanged, no shouted threats, just the cold, mechanical action of a blue steel pistol being raised. The silence of the intersection was shattered by 4 distinct shots. These were not random spray-and-pray bullets. They were fired with terrifying accuracy. The ammunition used was later identified as Gecko 9mm armor-piercing rounds, a rare and highly specialized type of ammo designed to penetrate metal and Kevlar. This detail alone suggests that this was not a random act of road rage or spur-of-the-moment gang shooting. This was a professional hit. The bullets tore through the passenger door of the Suburban. The first bullet struck Biggie in the left forearm and traveled down to his wrist. The second bullet hit him in the back, missing all vital organs and exiting through his left shoulder. The third bullet struck his outer left thigh and exited through his inner left thigh. It was the fourth bullet that was the fatal blow. It entered his right hip, ripped through his colon, liver, heart, and the upper lobe of his left lung before coming to a rest in his left shoulder area. In a matter of seconds, the King of New York had been mortally wounded. The scene descended into absolute chaos. The Impala screeched away, vanishing into the night down Wilshire Boulevard. Inside the Suburban, the realization of what had happened took a horrifying moment to sink in. Biggie was slumped over, bleeding profusely. His friends, initially thinking the car had just been hit by rocks or debris, quickly realized the gravity of the situation when they saw the blood. Puffy Combs jumped out of his vehicle and ran to the Suburban. The driver, G-Money, floored the gas, making a frantic U-turn and speeding towards Cedars-Sinai Medical Center, which was only minutes away. The journey to the hospital was a blur of panic and prayer. When they arrived at the emergency bay, the entourage helped lift the massive frame of Christopher Wallace onto a gurney. Doctors and nurses swarmed the trauma room. An emergency thoracotomy was performed, a desperate procedure where the chest is cracked open to massage the heart manually and assess internal damage. But the damage from that fourth bullet was catastrophic. The devastation to his vital organs was too severe. At 1:15 a.m., just 30 minutes after the shooting, Christopher Wallace was pronounced dead. He was 24 years old. The news broke instantly. The hip-hop community, still reeling from Tupac's death, was plunged into a state of disbelief. The streets of Brooklyn wept while the streets of Los Angeles braced for a war. But as the initial shock faded, the focus shifted to the investigation, a process that would become one of the most controversial, convoluted, and frustrating chapters in American criminal history. The Los Angeles Police Department was immediately under pressure to solve the case. However, from the very beginning, the investigation was plagued by irregularities, dead ends, and allegations of corruption. The initial detectives found little cooperation from the witnesses. The code of the streets, "Stop snitching," was in full effect. But there was also a deep distrust of the police. And as it turned out, that distrust was well-founded. To understand why the Biggie Smalls murder investigation stalled, we must delve into the dark underbelly of the LAPD in the late 1990s, specifically the Rampart Division scandal. This was a period where the line between the cops and the gang members they policed had not just blurred. It had vanished. Officers were on the payroll of heavy hitters like Suge Knight. They were working security for death row records, partying with gang members, and in some cases, allegedly participating in crimes. Enter Detective Russell Poole. Poole was a straight-arrow homicide detective who was assigned to the robbery-homicide division. He began investigating the shooting and quickly uncovered a labyrinth of connections that pointed away from a simple gang dispute and toward a complex conspiracy involving rogue police officers. Poole's investigation gained traction when he looked into an incident that occurred shortly after Biggie's death involving an LAPD officer named Kevin Gaines. Gaines was shot and killed in a road rage incident by another undercover cop, Frank Liga. In the aftermath, it was discovered that Gaines was living well beyond his means, driving a Mercedes and living with Suge Knight's ex-wife. This was the first thread that, when pulled, unraveled the Rampart scandal. Poole's theory regarding the Biggie murder centered on a man named David Mack. Mack was an LAPD officer, a quintessential corrupt cop who led a double life. By day, he wore the badge. By night, he was a mob Peru associate. Months after Biggie's murder, Mack was arrested for robbing a Bank of America of nearly $700,000. When investigators searched Mack's house, they found a shrine to Tupac Shakur. But more chillingly, they found a black Chevrolet Impala SS parked in his garage, the same make and model as the car used in the assassination. Furthermore, Mack had a close associate named Amir Muhammad, also known as Harry Billups. Muhammad fit the description of the shooter. A tall, dark-skinned man who was often seen in suits and bow ties, consistent with the Nation of Islam attire or the professional dress described by witnesses. Poole theorized that Suge Knight, seething in prison and wanting revenge for the death of his star artist Tupac, had orchestrated the hit. According to this theory, Knight used his connections within the LAPD, specifically David Mack, to facilitate the murder. Mack, in turn, allegedly tapped Amir Muhammad to be the trigger man. It was a tidy, terrifying theory. The police and the street gangs working in unison to assassinate a cultural icon. Poole fought hard to pursue this lead. He wanted to subpoena phone records, interview death row affiliates, and dig deeper into the Mack-Knight connection. However, Poole hit a wall. His superiors at the LAPD, including Chief Bernard Parks, allegedly blocked his efforts. The department was already hemorrhaging public trust due to the unfolding Rampart scandal, which revealed dozens of officers were framing suspects, planting evidence, and beating civilians. Admitting that an LAPD officer might have orchestrated the murder of Biggie Smalls would have been the final nail in the coffin for the department's reputation. Poole was told to back off. Frustrated and disillusioned, he eventually resigned from the force, dying of a heart attack years later while still trying to prove his theory. His relentless pursuit of the truth became the basis for the book Labyrinth, which was later adapted into the movie City of Lies. But the David Mack theory is not the only one. In the years that followed, a competing narrative emerged, one that shifted the blame away from a police conspiracy and back toward the street gangs. This theory was championed by Detective Greg Kading, who led a federal task force in the mid-2000s to re-examine the case. Kading's investigation, documented in his book Murder Rap, relied heavily on the testimony of a woman named Kefe D., the uncle of Orlando Anderson, the man suspected of killing Tupac. However, for the Biggie murder, Kading's key witness was a woman named Teresa Swan, a confidant of Suge Knight. Through complex interrogation tactics and deals, the task force secured information suggesting that Suge Knight had indeed ordered the hit. But the mechanism was different. According to this theory, Suge reached out to a mob Peru gang member named Wardell Poochie Faust. Poochie was a known shooter, a man with a reputation for violence. The allegation is that Suge paid Poochie roughly $13,000 to kill Biggie. Under this theory, Poochie stalked the party at the Peterson Automotive Museum. He waited in his own sedan, followed the convoy, and when the opportunity presented itself at the red light, he took the shots. Proponents of this theory point to the fact that Poochie was in the area, had the motive of gang loyalty and financial gain, and fit the general description. Poochie himself was killed in a motorcycle shooting in 2003, taking any secrets he had to the grave. This theory is convenient for the LAPD because it removes the direct involvement of their own officers in the actual shooting, framing it as a straightforward gang retaliation orchestrated by the incarcerated Knight. We must also consider the role of the FBI. For years, the Bureau kept a massive file on Christopher Wallace, investigating not just his death, but alleged ties to the Genovese crime family and money laundering. Claims that have largely been dismissed as exaggerated or misunderstood. When the FBI finally released their redacted files on the murder investigation, they revealed that they, too, had looked closely at the rogue cop theory. The files contained ballistic reports about the Gecko 9mm ammo. Interestingly, that specific ammunition was found at the home of a police officer in an unrelated search, further fueling the suspicion that the bullets came from law enforcement supplies. The FBI files also detail the discovery of a driver's license belonging to a David Mack look-alike, and various witness statements that were never fully followed up on by the LAPD. The family of Christopher Wallace, led by his indomitable mother, Valletta Wallace, and his widow, Faith Evans, waged a long and heartbreaking legal battle against the city of Los Angeles. They filed a wrongful death lawsuit, arguing that the LAPD knew about the plot to kill Biggie and failed to protect him, or worse, that their officers were complicit. The civil trial was a sensation. It brought to light the incompetence of the initial investigation. Evidence had been lost. A drawer full of potential evidence in the detective's desk had been untouched for years. The composite sketch of the shooter had been hidden in a desk drawer. The judge in the case even declared a mistrial at one point due to the city withholding evidence. The suit was eventually dismissed without prejudice in 2010, not because the family was wrong, but because the procedural hurdles and the financial cost of fighting the city became insurmountable. Valletta Wallace, however, has never stopped believing that the LAPD knows exactly who killed her son. Let us dig deeper into the conspiracy theories, for they are vast and varied. Beyond the rogue cop and Poochie theories, there are whispers of even darker plots. Some suggest that the hit was sanctioned by higher-ups in the music industry to boost record sales, capitalizing on the death cells phenomenon that skyrocketed Tupac's posthumous earnings. Others believe that the government monitors and neutralizes influential black leaders, classifying rappers like Tupac and Biggie as dangerous political figures capable of mobilizing the youth. While these theories lack hard evidence, they speak to the deep-seated paranoia and lack of trust in official narratives that pervade the community. We must also analyze the security failure on that night. How did a convoy of seasoned security professionals allow a strange car to pull up on the blind side of their principal client? Why was Biggie in the front seat, the so-called death seat, usually reserved for security? Standard protocol dictates the VIP sits in the back, behind the driver. Was it a simple lapse in judgment due to the relaxed vibe of the party? Or was it something more sinister? Some have pointed fingers at the entourage itself, suggesting that information about the route and the seating arrangement was leaked to the shooter. The fact that the shooter knew exactly which car Biggie was in and exactly where he was sitting implies inside knowledge. The convoy had barely traveled a few blocks. The window of opportunity was tiny. The precision required suggests the shooter was waiting for that specific signal or had eyes on the departure. The forensic evidence, or lack thereof, remains a point of frustration. The Impala was never found. The gun was never recovered. The shell casings provided the only real clue with their rare composition. Yet even that lead dissipated into the bureaucracy of the investigation. In modern times, with ubiquitous CCTV and license plate readers, this crime might have been solved in hours. But in 1997, the grainy footage from the museum and the lack of cameras at the intersection allowed the killer to vanish into the urban sprawl of Los Angeles like a ghost. As we look at the legacy of this case, it is impossible to separate the tragedy from the art. Biggie's second album, Life After Death, was released just weeks after his murder. It is a haunting masterpiece, filled with references to mortality, paranoia, and the dark side of fame. Songs like You're Nobody serve as a chilling epitaph, as if he knew his time was running out. The album went diamond, cementing his status as one of the greatest to ever touch a microphone. But the music is forever shadowed by the image of that green Suburban riddled with bullet holes. Today, the case remains officially unsolved. The Los Angeles Police Department lists it as an open homicide, but there is no active task force, no new leads being publicly pursued. The key players are either dead, incarcerated, or have moved on. Suge Knight is currently serving a lengthy prison sentence for a completely different vehicular manslaughter case. David Mack served his time for the bank robbery and has largely stayed out of the public eye, maintaining his innocence regarding the murder. Amir Muhammad has never been charged and denies any involvement. The truth is likely buried in a file box in the basement of the LAPD headquarters, or perhaps it died with the men who pulled the trigger and drove the car. The assassination of the Notorious B.I.G. was not just the death of a man. It was the end of an era. It marked the moment when the innocence of the golden age of hip-hop was officially over, replaced by a corporate, sanitized version of the culture that feared the streets rather than embraced them. It left a mother without a son, children without a father, and the world without the voice of a generation. We have traversed the timeline, examined the ballistics, profiled the suspects, and delved into the corruption. The picture that emerges is one of a systemic failure of justice. Whether it was a gang hit sanctioned by a rival mogul or a conspiracy involving sworn officers of the law, the result remains the same. Christopher Wallace was executed in public view, and no one has ever paid the price. As we conclude this deep dive, I want you to think about the intricacies of the timeline we just discussed. Think about the stopped car at the red light, the blue suit, the gecko rounds. Think about the silence of the witnesses and the vanished evidence. This has been a DCF Investigations special report. We pride ourselves on going deeper than the headlines, piecing together the fragments of history that others leave behind. Now, I turn the question over to you. Considering the evidence of the gecko ammunition and the deep corruption within the Rampart division, do you believe the hit was a purely gang-related retaliation? Or was it, as Russell Poole believed until his dying day, a sanctioned hit involving the Los Angeles Police Department? Leave your thoughts, your theories, and your analysis in the comments below. We read every single one. Stay vigilant,